All right. Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yes. Happy Monday to all.
Yes, sir. Ian is in the vintage studio.
Yes. I mean that
Can we
background.
do a widescreen just to kind of show him?
Yeah, let's get him. There he is. Now, that wall looks very reminiscent to a classic episode that took place in probably January of 2020, right before a pandemic. There was a gentleman in a suit. He brought a director's chair.
Director got fired same day.
And you also came bearing gifts.
For sure.
That was the first for us. Cologne. He had some cologne. I still have that cologne.
That's a fact.
Hey, appreciate
if you're an OG earner, you know that's where we started. Well, we actually started in my office, but that's where after the first 2 episodes we transitioned to the dining room. So that's very nostalgic. That'll be a museum one of these days.
Big facts.
Ian is in the nostalgic dining room. So you know it's gonna be a legendary episode.
Yeah.
So we got a lot to get to. So I'm gonna cut the intro kind of short. Just very, very quick. I'll just say we got a dope episode tomorrow for Earn Your Leisure with Denise the Broker. She's in Dubai and she'll be talking about real estate opportunities in Dubai, which is very, very interesting. Dubai and Abu Dhabi and the whole UAE.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a dope international type of episode, and also it's relevant to American investors. And today, dope episode, my boy Jeezy. Shout out to Jeezy. Our Revolt Family Assets Over Liabilities comes out today, and it comes on YouTube on Wednesday. So
dare I say another classic?
For sure. Ian, any announcements?
Can't wait to hear it. Stock Club call this Wednesday. We had an amazing call yesterday. I want to shout out Nicole, birthday coming up. Ladoon, birthday coming up. Shout out to M4, birthday coming up. Had a good time celebrating this weekend with y'all. And if I've made you money, please put yes in chat.
Yes. Shout out to all those birthdays. Shout out to G for finishing the marathon. Shout out to everybody that was part of that marathon. That was an incredible experience to be part of, man. So shout out to everybody that completed the race and showed determination at a different level. All right, so before we go any further, y'all know how this works, man. Do your own research. Our content is intended to be used and must be used for informational purposes only. It's very important that you do your own analysis before making an investment based on your own personal circumstances. You should take independent financial advice from a professional in connection with, or independently research and verify any information that you find on the show, whether for the purpose of making an investment decision or otherwise. This is a message brought to you by the good brothers at Earn Your Leisure and the good brother, Ian Dunlap, the master investor himself. Continue to do the research, share the research, and when it's great, give credit to the people you found it from.
For sure. So we got a special episode today. We got a guest, presidential candidate.
Yes.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. But before we do that, let's talk about some topics. So the S&P 500 rose 5.9% past week. That is the best week since November 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think caused the S&P to rise? And is this a sign going forward for the rest of the year and into 2024?
Yeah, the number one thing that causes it to rise is that interest rates are going to be paused. So that sent the market into a frenzy. Also, too, if we're going to be very honest, mutual funds, hedge funds need to bring on clients that they're wrapping up. You can't have the market in a tailspin to the downside. So there's a couple things that are playing a couple key factors. The economy overall is still weak, even though no one wants to say it, but because they are guessing that interest rates are going to be hiked, which allows for growth in a lot of these sectors. Like, Square went up 20%. There was a bunch of companies that went up 15, 20% on Friday of last week. This Monday has been great thus far. The number one reason, and we talked about it in Market Monday Chicago, the indicator that matters the most is the yield curve and then interest rates. If interest rates are not going any higher, it allows for growth in the stock market and businesses worldwide. So that's the reason why.
Yeah, and we started last week with the word unfortunate. Bad news for jobs means good news for stocks. And so when we're talking about bad news, they said that only 150,000 jobs were added to the economy, which is an indicator that the economy is slowing down, right?
Yes.
If the economy slows down, then the Fed says, all right, it's slowed down to a point we don't have to raise rates. When rates don't get raised, we see what happens to the stock market, right?
Yeah.
And so they paused it for November. And now there's a probability, I think it's at 95%, that they will be frozen again for December. And so if you look at 2 months of freezing rates, that's good for the stock market, right? In addition, we talked from a historical standpoint about the S&P and what happens to it in November. It's the best month to trade.
Yes.
the timing couldn't be even better, right? And so you take a couple of these factors in addition to the unemployment rate, again, another job indicator, that rose to 3.9%. And so more people are unemployed, better for the economy, better for stocks because money has slowed down. And then Ian, you talked about the Treasury rate. And so this is interesting. The 10-year Treasury rate, it ended at 4.5%, which was almost 3 points down from 4.8% a week ago. It was the steepest drop since March. And so you take all these things into account. You talk about wages slowing down, all these things that sound like terrible for the average person actually end up being good for the stock market.
Yeah, in September, we already know it's the worst month. You're going to drop normally 1%. That's a great time to buy. A lot of tax rebalancing is happening in October. Mutual funds are deploying capital for the fourth quarter, usually in October and November. So it's a bunch of factors that kind of played in. But that's why I always say, like, the market is rigged to permanently stay up. As much doom and gloom as there is, the indexes are going to be great. People asked me yesterday and this morning, is 2 Tech 2 index still the way to go? Is VOO up? Is VTI up? Is the S&P up? Yes.
Good.
So hold for the long term and you'll be good.
Yeah, higher yields means it's going to be more expensive for not only you, but for companies to borrow money. So as those numbers come down, you'll see more people investing in companies and they're going to have more profits because of that. So it's just an inverse relationship. And again, it feels like to the average person, it's unfortunate, and it is, but this is just how the economy works.
And we're in a very interesting time too, because if you don't put the capital and deploy the capital somewhere, inflation is literally going to set it on fire. So you can't sit on cash like you could maybe 4 or 5 years ago and be like, no, I'm fine. Like, if you're saving, you're actually losing money. So now you have to deploy the capital to real estate, to angel, to VC, or to stocks, or risk losing 6 or 7% on the capital that you have. And if you have a lot of money sitting, 100 grand, 200 grand, oh man, it's burning a hole in your pocket and in your portfolio at the same time.
At the same damn time.
Yep.
So let's talk about crypto and stocks. Base
Yes.
reported its 7th straight quarter of losses, but it does seem that crypto is on the uptick these days. XRP. Mike Jones posted an XRP post today.
The Mike Jones?
Yeah.
Who is Mike Jones coming?
XRP is sharply on an uptick today. So at what point do you see a good buying opportunity for Coinbase, if possible?
Yeah, it's currently at 85. I like it at 72. To me, Coinbase is a lagging indicator for how crypto is doing. So, of course, Bitcoin, XRP, some cases Ethereum, I would want to look there first. But Coinbase is going to be a lagger because they have a lot of regulation issues. But if they go on a tear, it's going to be a great sign that crypto is going to do well. But I like it at like around $72.
Here's the interesting part, Ian. Like, if you look at it, the context of it, from year to date, it's up 128%. The stock.
Yes.
Right. So it's one of these things when we look at it from we scale out a little bit. It actually is up, but they've had a negative quarter for the 7th time in a row, and there's a lot to do with that. And some of the reasons is that the trading volume is down, right? And so if we look at when Bitcoin actually started to peak around late October or maybe late September and into October, what happened around that time? The SEC decided that, hey, we might be able, there's an investigation, hey, we might be able to make an ETF out of cryptocurrency. And so you start to see the numbers start to spike. But that happens in October, which is not this quarter, the 3rd quarter that just reported.
Yeah.
So you have to start looking at things from a whole scale standpoint because, the next quarter you might see that. And here's the translation, right? If the trading volume is down, that means the revenue that they get from transactions is down.
It's down.
So if that happens quarter after quarter, they're not making money, even though we're watching the stock climb because people are actually in the space, and we've seen an uptick. The negative correlation is going to be there until we start seeing people trade more. This isn't like 2017 where people were on the platform and it was a craze. We're starting to see people slowly come in. The SEC, like I said, that report helped it. But it's interesting. Like, so when you're looking at the stock price and you're looking at the earnings reports, you got to have a totality look at it.
Brokerages are never a good business to invest in long term because you really can't control the products you have too much negative exposure. And also there's usually a bunch of companies that merge together. Like for those of you who are using TD Ameritrade or were using TD Ameritrade, now you need to switch over to Swap to be able to access Thinkorswim. So I don't like the brokerage business, but for me, Coinbase is a lagging indicator on crypto overall. Yes, it has had that rise over the last year, but it's a far cry from that 337, 340 area it was at the craze. And I told you guys, if the ETF got approved, Bitcoin to go to 34,985. We've reached past that point. If I made you money, please put yes in chat.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to see a rise in crypto over the next year and a half for sure, especially as the economy is getting worse.
And this was the closest quarter that they've come to actually having positive revenue. I think they were like 2 million, maybe 3 million off. And so the signs are pointing to next quarter, obviously with what we just talked about with the approval of the ETF pending, there could be a change in the next quarter. Yeah.
So do you see any stock opportunities related to crypto? Obviously, Coinbase is a stock that, is like, relying on the success of cryptocurrency. But like if somebody wants to invest in the stock market and tie it to some level of crypto, boom, do you have any stocks that you think could be beneficial?
Only ones I'm leaning on right now directly are the cryptocurrency. So I'm Bitcoin, XRP. I'm a fan of.
What about a Bitcoin ETF or like a cryptocurrency ETF?
No. Here's the reason why. It's like if I try to start a football league, which Vince McMahon has done 3 times, I think my biggest competitor is the Goliath that cannot be beaten with the slingshot and the rock. So when BlackRock finally announces their ETF and all the institutional money starts to flow through them, it's going to be hard for the other players. Even like you can say, I like MicroStrategy and I like Michael Saylor, but I don't think he can defeat BlackRock. Like the game is not fair. We got to have some honest conversations. 2023, 2024. The game is not meant to be fair. The purpose of capitalism is to get an edge that no one else can beat. We want to talk about real generational wealth. You can only have, and next year we got to have a conversation about generational wealth being overrated. But you can only build generational wealth if a limited number of people are able to do something that you're not able to do. I don't want BlackRock and Vanguard as a competitor. I said 2 years ago, I think everybody should stop screaming about what their plan is because the banks are going to come in and take it over. Here we are. It's too late. XRP is about to get into the fold. It may be tough for Ethereum. Here we are. So stocks directly, no. I would look at what companies in that top 7 are hiring. Meta may be an ancillary or tertiary play. Apple will eventually do something big in the crypto space, but as far as the ETFs, no, I wouldn't do it.
So yeah, and just to add to that, right? You said that the SEC might approve the Bitcoin ETF. Well, Coinbase is fighting the SEC right now, right? They're still under a legal fight for what they had the lawsuit in June about them being a legal securities exchange platform, and so you're battling that too on top of everything inside of the space and from competitors who are trying to now create ETFs for the space.
Yeah. You don't want to fight a trend. It's a lot easier to push a boulder downhill than it is up.
So before we bring on our guests, let's talk about this quickly. Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway has a record-breaking cash pile of $157 billion. Tremendous amount of money. They've sold off a lot of their positions in stock, and they are hoarding cash right now. So what does this mean? Does this signal something in the economy, or is this just regular protocol? Should people, take note of this?
Yes, absolutely. I love this post that you made. Number one, when you see a famed investor and a person as wealthy as Warren have that much cash in their company, it is a sign that there are not many assets that are investable at this time. Commercial real estate, bubbles about to pop. San Francisco has a huge issue that needs to be fixed. And I don't know if San Francisco needs to declare bankruptcy, but the value of those buildings are not worth what everyone says they are, and they have a huge homeless issue. And also when the bubble does pop, you need money to deploy. Like things really happen in a 7 to 10 year cycle. I know because we do the show weekly, and we hear the news cycle, people get so concerned about missing an opportunity. You have to catch the macro opportunity, not the micro. So if I bought a building for $7 billion and it's only worth $3 billion, I either have to give the keys back or go to the bank to restructure. That's all of San Fran. Shout out to everybody. I was talking to this earlier. Everybody in New Jersey and New York is running to Indiana and Chicago and Pennsylvania and Florida. Y'all driving the prices up, everything, right? At some point, if we don't do a massive debt restructuring, we're going to have a collapse. And when that collapse happens, you're going to see Warren and Charlie aggressively go shop. They're going to do like Michael Jackson. I want this one. I want this one. He's going to pick every asset class to buy in at the right price. And this is why I always say, when you're just buying at any price because of a hype cycle, see what Druckenmiller is doing. Paul Tudor Jones, Warren Buffett, BlackRock, they run the world, right? At State Street, if they're not buying aggressively, it's not the time to buy. So he is getting his war chest ready for when these amazing opportunities come. And I'm doing the same thing, and I cannot wait.
Yeah, for sure. Always prepare for a rainy day because it's always going to rain. That's a fact.
Absolutely.
But you can reap the harvest of it if you have seeds that you can plant into the ground. But if you're not prepared, then you're just going to get, drenched. So I think it's important to definitely take heat when you see people like that starting to just hoard cash.
Mm-hmm.
It's not done it's done for a reason. It's not just done out of accidents. It's actually, a strategic plan that's put in place. So,
and I would also add, especially for like Warren Buffett, look at the travel tendencies. Where are they traveling? What parts of the world are they going to? Yep. What are the thriving economies inside those places that they travel? We saw him go to China. He talked about Taiwan when he was there. He talked about semis. They have a hoard of cash. Where is the next place that they're looking for? Look at where they're traveling. Look at what the geopolitical climate is there. Look what the industries that dominate in those areas are, because he's always looking for the next thing throughout the world.
And since I'm in the classic room, at some point we got to talk about me getting an award for coming up with this 2 Tech 2 index. And I'll put y'all onto this before Buffett got in it. 51% of his portfolio is in Apple. Apple is the accelerator, safety marker, and outperforming bonds. Like Rashad, if we sat here in 2020 and I'm like, listen, Apple's going to replace the bond market, you'd be like, you and the director, get out of here. And here we are.
In the chair.
Here we are. Oh my God. I never thought I would see the day. But when I was talking to Stock Club about this, the best empires are built when you are able to over deliver on result. While everyone's promising huge returns, and if you miss those marks, Apple's been a beacon of safety for 12 or 13 years now. Invest in the companies and opportunities that will provide you safety. No one's going to get you 500, 600, 700% just because. So if I made you money, please put yes in chat, because there's not a lot of people making people money out here. And I'm going to be clear on that.
Okay. Let's be clear on that. So without further ado, we have our guest that I think is in the building with us. So yes, we will bring on our esteemed guest. Okay, so we have a guest today, as we said earlier, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. First and foremost, thank you for joining us. So attorney, author, activist, obviously comes from political royalty as far as his family, but somebody that has made his own mark in the world of a variety of different areas, but especially politics. And for this particular conversation, we'll be talking about his aspirations of becoming the next president, presidential candidate for 2024. Very interesting political season that we're in. Variety of
that's an understatement.
Yeah, for sure. So it's important to have this conversation, and it's important to highlight candidates that aren't always in the news all the time. Obviously, we're talking about, Biden and Trump 24 hours a day, but there are other people that are running for president.
Yep.
And their voices are important and need to be heard for a variety of different reasons. It's good to have balance, right? But then also, it's good to highlight other people's voices because they have other thoughts on views that are important to get out to the masses and for politicians to hear, because the public, has a right to have more than just two choices every single year. So Yes. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. So I'll get right to it. And I'll start with the most pressing issue in the world right now. Israel, Palestine. I would like to know your thoughts on the current situation. And I also would like to know your thoughts on, if you were president right now today, what would be your course of action?
I mean, I think the thing that, there's a lot going on in Israel. I think the major preoccupations that, all of us have right now is trying to end the carnage, particularly as it applies to innocent children. Half the people in Gaza are under 18, and Hamas, has a policy of using civilian shields and stopping the movement of people of Gaza away from the bombing Israel. I know the IDF made a presentation this week to President Herzog in the Knesset, showing that they had sent out over 6 million emails or text messages to people warning them whenever they're bombing. They made 2.5 million robocalls to families to warn them to move out of areas they intended to bomb, and that had and was distributed, I think, 2 million Arab language pamphlets warning people that when people try to move, they're shot by Hamas snipers. The north-south corridor has been closed, and that makes that a very, very dangerous theater of operations to be a civilian in. The Hamas leadership has not built bomb shelters for the people of Gaza. They've built 300 miles of tunnels to hide themselves, their families, and their fighters, but not for civilians. And the other issue that keeps me awake at night is the expansion into a regional war, and that would bring in Hezbollah, and then Lebanon, and perhaps Syria, and even Turkey. Erdogan has made noises about and is sending the fleet down into the Mediterranean, and so there's all kinds of scenarios where we could sleepwalk into World War III. And so my objectives would be to make sure to try to make sure that to the extent there's an escalation, that it's a staged escalation that can be easily staged back, and to keep the war from expanding.
So just a quick follow up on that. So do you think that, okay, if you send emails to people and warn them to leave, but they have no real place to go, and they don't leave, and you bomb, like Israel bombed a refugee camp, and it's reported that 500 people died, who I'm assuming all those people were civilians, to try to get one person. That's essentially like blowing up a mall because a mass shooter is hiding in a store inside the mall, right? Like, probably not the most responsible thing to do. So do you feel that Israel has no course to take a more responsible manner when dealing with civilian population?
Well, first of all, the Biden administration and many, many other responsible institutions have warned against accepting any of the death or the casualty reports from Hamas. Hamas, and this is what the Biden administration has historically, characteristically exaggerates its casualty reports by about 20 times. We also don't know, as with the hospital, which was originally blamed on Israel till it was proven that it was not an Israel rocket, historically about 10% of Hamas's rockets misfire and land on Gaza. So Hamas has sent out about 6,000 rockets to Israel. And if you assume 10% of those have landed on Gaza, that's 600 rockets, and that a lot of the casualties. We don't know when you see these TikTok casualties in China. Of course, it's part of the of Hamas's public relations crusade. When you see these, you don't know whether the kids are dying of from an Israeli rocket or from a Hamas misfire, and Israel, has Israel characteristically, Colonel Kemp, who's the world's authority on municipal warfare, has said that Israel takes better precautions than any nation in the world, any nation in the history of the world, to avoid civilian casualties, using technologies, avoiding hits, even when they know that they can kill a terrorist if there's going to be a disproportionate collateral damage injury rate. So I hesitate to believe, and Hamas, of course, does not distinguish between the deaths of civilians and the deaths of Hamas fighters. And Israel is in there killing a lot of Hamas fighters. The real question that I think that you are asking is, that it gets down to, is what do you want Israel to do? There, of course, in every war, when we went in to get Hitler, there were civilian casualties. When we went in to get Tojo in Japan, when we went to get Osama bin Laden and Tora Bora, there were civilian casualties. So anytime, and what do you want Israel to do? Israel gave Gaza its freedom, gave them the keys in 2005. And then Hamas took over and immediately declared war on Israel, a war of total extermination. This is in its charter, that they want to kill every Jew and destroy Israel. And in its charter, it says it's against Islamic law to even negotiate with the Israelis. So you have a neighbor that has said, we are going to destroy your country. We're going to kill everybody in your country who's Jewish. And then starts bombing you. So Hamas, since 2006, has sent 30,000 rockets and mortars into civilian targets in Israel. You consider, and then it sends a force into Israel to murder civilians the most grisly way, baking a baby in an oven alive, nailing families to the walls and then burning them alive, killing 280 people, teenagers at a music concert. And, the worst slaughter since the Holocaust, it's proportionally about I think 30 times what 9/11 proportionate to population. There are 9 million people in Israel. It's 16 times the Pearl Harbor attack that sent us into World War II. So, do you want
Well, we have to just
let me ask you this question: what would, if Cuba sent one rocket into Miami?
Just in the sake of journalism, because we have to be fair. I don't know. I don't know if you said they baked the baby in the oven, but you said that the deaths might be TikTok deaths for Palestinians. So if we're going to question narratives, then I think we have to question it across the board.
Well, you can question it. The thing is, the Israeli government has shown those pictures which were taken off of body cams and GoPros that were run. And who goes to murder civilians wearing GoPros? By the way, that's That is a very telling thing. And from phone videos that were taken by Hamas fighters of them doing these things. And they've also released the autopsy report on the baby who was cooked in the oven that shows that one of the heating elements, they couldn't fit the baby into the oven, and one of the heating elements was annealed to his body. So, and Israel got the 200 leading journalists and showed them all of these videos. So yeah, and of course there's propaganda on both sides. But here's the big question: if Cuba sent one missile into Miami, how long would it take us to invade Cuba? And of course, less
than 24 hours. But you made a point of there's casualties in every war, but that doesn't justify it.
It's true.
And there are articles of war that countries should abide by, and there's issues on both sides because there's no real Hamas presence in the West Bank, and we see very disturbing images from New York Times, respected journalists, where Israeli settlers taking Palestinians forcefully out of their homes. But we can move on for a different topic. We only have a limited time.
And by the way, I condemn that. I condemn those, and I agree that those actions by the Israeli settlers are criminal, that they're wrong, that they're contemptible, and I condemn them, just like I condemn any kind of war crime. So, but I would say that you have an organization that has hijacked Gaza. I'm not blaming the people of Gaza, but the organization and the people who run that organization, Ismail Haniyeh, the other ones are all billionaires. Ismail Haniyeh has $3.5 billion. The head of Hamas was on the cover of Forbes with $5 billion. They live in Doha, they live in Ankara and Turkey and Qatar, in giant palaces and villas, and they keep their people in total poverty. And all of the money that goes in, the Gazans receive more money than any people on the face of the earth from international aid organizations, from Europe and the United States. And they spend, instead of spending that on building homes for people and building communities and building an economy and a good life, they spend virtually 100% of that money on weapons, on building tunnels, on waging genocide against Israel. Their charter requires them to wage genocide, to kill every Jew. It says in it, if you find a Jew behind a tree, the tree will shout out, Abdullah, there's a Jew behind me, come kill him. And that's in their charter, that all the Jews must be extinguished. So if you're living next door to a neighbor, there's no country in the world that would allow a neighbor to bombard them with 30,000 rockets to hit civilian populations and not go in and redress that. I think asking Israel to do
just a quick question, and because
you wouldn't ask anybody else to do.
Just a quick question, because I want to go back to the first thing you said, that a year from today, there's going to be a presidential election that's going to happen in our country. And so this is obviously an issue that the world is watching closely, and the fact that social media is a part of it. And like you said, it could be propaganda, but people are having their eyes on it. What's interesting is that both sides, right and left, are going to be judged on how they handle this conflict. And so what's interesting, I was looking at polls recently, is that amongst people who don't favor either party, Republican or Democrat, you were kind of the leading candidate right now. And so I want to know what has attributed to you being so accessible and somebody that people are looking to, like his message is what we're favoring right now.
Well, are you talking about relating this to Israel? Because I don't think my popularity has...
No, I'm just talking about
the issue altogether.
The issue altogether, right? There's views from the right and the left, right? And
we had two polls come out last week. One by the two biggest polling organizations, or two of the three biggest, Quinnipiac And then the Harvard-Harris poll, which is Mark Penn's organization, they both had me at 22 points in a three-way race with Biden and Trump, and with my favorability ratings about 19%, and they above water, with both President Biden and President Trump underwater. My favorability ratings were, and I sound like I'm bragging now, but I'm not. I'm telling you that I'm giving you some groundwork because I don't understand it either. But my favorability ratings are 25 points ahead of any of them, and higher than anybody else that they polled, including people who aren't politicians like Elon Musk. Why is that? I've had nothing but bad publicity for, at least 5 years. I've had tens of thousands of articles written about me, and virtually all of them have been negative. I think people are hearing in one way or another, either through podcasts or looking at my speeches or on YouTube or whatever, are hearing a message that is not vitriolic, that is not polarizing, that is trying to bring people together. That, what I've been trying to do from the beginning of this campaign is to identify those issues, that the values that we all have in common, rather than focusing on the issues that keep us apart. I try not to criticize personally President Biden and President Trump. I'm happy to criticize them on their politics and on their policies, but I think people are ready to hear a message that is not polarizing. I think that's one of the issues, and I'd love to hear what your opinion is, because I don't completely understand it. The other thing I would say is that I do a lot of long form interviews like this one,
yes,
where which podcasts, but also like Tucker Carlson and Matt Hoffa and Charlemagne and you guys, and I think people like hearing somebody who is in these long formats where you can really kind of get a feel of the person and understand what they're I see something besides these kind of one-dimensional political people who have answers for everything, but may not always be completely thoughtful. So I don't know. I'd love to hear your opinion about what you think is going on.
I think people are tired of being lied to, and which leads me to a question. Record $17 trillion in household debt, 12 trillion in mortgages, 1.6 trillion in auto loans. I want to ask you, what the hell happened to our country? How do we lose our way? And if elected president, what would you do to get us back on track to some of our glory days?
Well, when my uncle was sworn in as president in 1960, we were the richest country in the world. We owned half the wealth on the face of the earth. And we were the biggest exporter of goods. We had the biggest industrial base. Everybody in the world wanted what we had. When I traveled when I was a kid, strangers would ask me to buy my blue jeans. People wanted American transistor radios. They wanted RCA Victrolas, record players. They wanted American automobiles more than anything. We were the gold standard automobile in the world. 3 days before my uncle took office, President Eisenhower, the outgoing president, gave the most famous, what probably is the most important speech now in retrospect in American history, where he warned Americans against the emergence of a military-industrial complex that would turn us into an imperium abroad and to a national security state, a garrison state, a surveillance state at home. And that would bankrupt the American middle class and beggar them in their own country. And my uncle came into office and spent 1,000 days of his presidency fighting against the military-industrial complex. He said, in fact, one of his best friends, Ben Bradley, asked him what he wanted on his gravestone. And he said, what his epithet? He said, he kept the peace. He said the principal job of a president of the United States is to keep the country out of war. And he said that he didn't want kids in Africa who heard of the United States to be thinking of a man with a gun. He wanted to be thinking of a Peace Corps volunteer, and the Kennedy Milk Program gave nutrition to tens of millions of malnourished children around the world. Of the Alliance for Progress, the USAID, which he had designed to put America on the side of the poor around the world. And my uncle kept us out of Laos. He kept us out of Berlin in '62, kept us out of Cuba in '61 and '62, kept us out of Vietnam. He never sent a combat troop to Vietnam. And 30 days before he died, he ordered all 16,000 military advisors home from Vietnam. And then he was killed exactly 30 days later. My father ran against the war and the warfare machine in '68, won the Democratic primaries, and then was killed that night. Martin Luther King, who had become a peace activist, he had disagreed with many of his followers who said, "No, stay in our lane," and he said, "No, you cannot separate what's happening in Vietnam, the violence that we're exporting and the violence that we're bringing home. You cannot, the war on poverty is being bankrupted by the wars abroad." And he became the loudest voice against Vietnam. He was killed 2 months before my dad. And those traumas, my uncle's assassination, my father's assassination, Dr. King's assassination, the Vietnam War, 9/11 and COVID, pushed us down that road against each one of them, a little further down that road against which Eisenhower had warned us about, which is, becoming a military industrial complex. And today we are living in the country that he feared, that Eisenhower feared. We have a kabuki theater of democracy, which is, we have kind of these institutions that pretend to be democracy. We all go to vote, we talk about it, but there's nobody in this country that I'm talking to these days that believe that their voices are audible in Washington. And the capture of the agencies, by industry, by the military, by the oil, by pesticide, by pharmaceutical industry, and by Wall Street finance, the capture of the Fed, has inextricably shifted wealth upward to this new oligarchy of billionaires that we have, and it has created this system of widespread poverty below, where Americans today are hopeless, they're depressed, they're watching their communities disintegrate, they're pessimistic about their future. There's a whole generation of kids growing up. There was a poll, and I'll shut up, and there's a poll that came out a month ago that showed that in 2013, 85% of American kids between 18 and 34 years old said they were proud of the United States of America. The same poll last month showed that only 17%. And so sometime in the administration of the last two presidents, American youth have been completely disillusioned with our country and have become hopeless about their own futures.
If elected, what would you do to restore the middle class and get America back to being in its glory? Because I agree with all the points that you've made, but I think a lot of people want to hear tonight how you fix those if you get elected.
Yeah, well, number one, I'm going to unravel the empire abroad. We have 800 bases abroad, and I'm going to end the forever wars. There's not been a single war since World War I that we should have been fighting. And those wars have been, more than anything else, have drained our economy, have destroyed our moral authority around the world, and have made us enemies. They've given rise to BRICS now, which is, which controls 90% of the oil, and, our traditional friends like Brazil, Saudi Arabia are now turning against the American dollar, and that cataclysmic impacts of that are yet to be felt in our country. So I'll unravel the empire. I'm going to restore sovereignty and transparency to the Fed, so that it no longer is a mechanism or Wall Street shifting wealth upward. I'm going to end the chronic disease epidemic in this country, which is the biggest drain on our capital, where we spend $4.3 trillion now on healthcare. Compare that to $1.3 trillion on military and national security, with $4.3 trillion, and about 93% of that is for chronic disease. When my uncle was president, it was 6%. Only 6% of Americans had chronic disease. By 1986, 11%, 11.8%. By 2006, 54%. And today we don't know because NIH stopped publishing those data. But we know that, all of these diseases that suddenly appeared in 1989, autism went from 1 in 10,000 in my generation to 1 in every 34 kids in your generation. Food allergies suddenly appeared.
Yeah.
Asthma became ubiquitous. I had a brother who had asthma. I had 11 siblings, 70 cousins, and none of them had food allergies. Why do 5 of my 7 kids have allergies? Why did my brother had asthma? He was told by a doctor, his doctor, there'll never be a cure for asthma because it's so rare, nobody will ever study it. Well, now 1 out of every 8 Black kids in America's cities has asthma. Why did that happen? It's not, it's not genes. Genes don't cause epidemic. It's environmental toxins.
Toxins, yeah.
What are they, and why aren't we being told that? Where did juvenile diabetes suddenly explode? Rheumatoid arthritis, all these exotic diseases like Crohn's disease and lupus, that suddenly appeared. Eczema, and all of our kids are sick, horrendously sick. We have the sickest generation of children in American history, and we are the sickest country in the world. The reason, we had the worst body count during COVID. We had in our country, we had 16% of the COVID deaths. We only have 4.2% of the world population. So that's not a success story. Why are people getting awards for that? Why did that happen? 2 reasons. One is total mismanagement. Number 2, COVID was killing people with chronic disease, and we have the highest chronic disease burden on earth. CDC said that the average American to die from COVID had 3.8 chronic diseases. Now, look at the countries that didn't do what we did, that don't have those chronic diseases. Look at these poor countries. Remember at the beginning of the pandemic, Fauci and Bill Gates all said, we got to get the vaccines to Africa and Haiti because they're going to get wiped out because of their poverty. Well, what happened? Haiti had a 1.3% vaccination rate, and it had 15 deaths per million population. We had 3,000 deaths per million population.
Yeah.
So we had 200 times what Haiti. And Black people were dying faster than anybody. So Blacks in our country, 3,000 Blacks were dying per million population, but in Haiti, only 14 or 15. In Nigeria, which had 1.4% vaccination rate, they had a death rate of 1 in 14 per million. Again, 1/200th of the death rate here. The average death rate in Africa was 320 per million population. That's 1/10 of what we had. So somebody needs to be able to answer those questions. Why were Black people in our country dying and Black people everywhere else were thriving? We need to understand that.
Yes, for sure. We do need to understand it. What is your stance on reparations?
Yes.
I understand the moral argument for reparations. I think race-based reparations are very, very obviously unconstitutional under the recent Supreme Court decision in the Harvard case. So my approach to economic development in Black communities, I think, is more comprehensive than that, and less and constitutional. I've worked for 35 years as on the board of directors of Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration, which is the oldest community development corporation. My father started it in our country and in one of the poorest Black neighborhoods in America. And I watched what economic development could do to those neighborhoods. You know, one of the problems in Black neighborhoods is that there is no equity. And we have systematically stripped equity, including namely home ownership, from Black neighborhoods. By 2030, there will be essentially zero Black equity left in this country. And that's destroying these neighborhoods. If you don't own a home, if you don't own something that you can borrow money on, you have no entree to American capitalism. You are no longer a citizen. You are now a subject. And the challenge is, those communities are redlined. It was Black communities. The entire nation, collapsed. Our real estate collapsed in 2008 because of these balloon mortgages and these exotic instruments. Well, those companies were testing those exotic instruments for a decade earlier in Black people. That was the testing zone. And those, Bed-Stuy, when I started working there, was the reason my father chose that neighborhood is it was very poor, but it had a high incident of home ownership by Black families, many who have been there from the Civil War. And so they had the opportunity to start businesses, and they were very entrepreneurial. The problem is they were redlined, and my father ended that and got them access to capital. And the other problem with Black businesses is that a lot of, there's not the accrued knowledge, business knowledge in Black communities. Like my father always said, if he wanted to start a business, he'd call a friend of his from Harvard, the Harvard Business School, and say, how do you solve this problem? How do you do this accounting issue? How do you handle inventories? When do you pay for the inventories, et cetera? In a Black neighborhood, there is not that accrued knowledge, and people can't pick up the phone and get it. So one of the things we did with Bed-Stuy is we made those mentorships available to them. And when we first started working in Bed-Stuy, Fulton Street in Brooklyn, there wasn't a single open business. They were all boarded up. Today, it's a thriving community with Black-owned businesses everywhere. And the other thing we need to be doing in those communities is it's criminal what we're doing to schools, urban schools in this country. Kids are not getting educated. They're being warehoused in those schools. And what I see people teaching about for diversity training and all of these sort of anti-racism education and enforcement, et cetera, that you see, which is all great. But that's not going to solve the problem. What solves the problem, if you have a generation of kids who have self-confidence, who believe in themselves, who have access to capital, who are part of families that are building businesses, who own a business for themselves. I was called, when I was a kid, there was a lot of anti-Catholic prejudice in this country, and I got called names like mackerel snatcher, et cetera. And it never bothered me. I would think, it's that person's problem. They're calling me that. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of my religion. And, I was able to feel that way.
So, Mr. Kennedy, not to cut you off, but just, I just wanted to go, because you said, so I think we did two different conversations as far as Black economic empowerment. That's important. That's kind of the basis of our whole show. But the question was specifically around reparations. So you said, you're anti that, and you said that, I believe you said it's unconstitutional. But were Japanese Americans not compensated for what happened to them during World War II?
Yeah, Japanese Americans were compensated. And I think if reparations were not race-based, for example, if you just said, no matter what race you are, if you can trace your lineage back to slavery, you could not do reparations for Jim Crow. You can make a very strong moral case for that, and I grew up in a Jim Crow state, but you can't do race-based. You could say, okay, if I trace my lineage back to slavery and my family was promised 40 acres and a mule, and then we got double crossed on that you could conceivably bring that case, and that it would be that would pass constitutional muster. Do I think that that case politically that you could push through those kind of reparations in Congress? I think it would be a very, very heavy lift.
So you brought up a few issues, right? You talked about the lack of education in our community, the lack of schools, which hence talks about the lack of education. You talked about the lack of businesses in our communities. You said the issues with having no home equity. And these are all issues, redlining you brought up. But I want to talk about something that also plagues our communities, and that's criminal justice and mass incarceration and social criminal justice reform. So I want to know what your thoughts are around that, because as we know, Black, African Americans, and Latinx community are disproportionately incarcerated, more so than anybody in our country and pretty much the world for that matter. So what are your thoughts around criminal justice reform?
Well, I think the 1986 Criminal Justice Act, and then 1994, which incidentally were both supported by, or written, both of them by President Biden, were probably the worst blight on the African American community. And as you guys know, there was 100 to 1 in the 1986 Act. There was 100 to 1 penalty for crack cocaine vis-a-vis powder cocaine. And crack cocaine was a black drug. They're both cocaine. They're both the same drug, but the form was more common. Crack was more common in Black communities. So the penalties that were assigned to it were 100 times. So a kid who was in a Black community that got caught with some crack got 100 times the penalty of a kid in a white community a mile away that had powder cocaine. And in the years between, in the 8 years after that, the 86 Act, with the 94 Act, well, let's say this, by 1998, the Black population in America's prisons had doubled. And they were for mainly nonviolent crimes. It was for drug crimes. And we destroyed an entire generation of Black Americans. We made it in many states so they can't vote. They're disenfranchised. There was a generation of Black children who were raised without their fathers. And, there was, that's where rap music came from. All of these, the entire culture of the Black community, because prison was so commonplace, became part of the typical cultural experience.
I'm sorry. Are you saying that
for a country? No, to answer your question, I want to stop.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear what you were saying about the music itself. You're saying that the music derived from the mass incarceration, or because I just want to be clear.
Well, mass incarceration dictated the way people dressed, the music. All I'm saying is it was such a powerful and universal experience that it put the stamp on every aspect of Black culture. And it's, I don't think I'm not saying anything. I'm certainly not saying anything against rap music. I'm just saying that it changed it altered the entire culture, and it's not it's not a good thing. It was not a good thing for our country. It was definitely not a good thing for the Black population or for economic development or people being able to live in this country and fulfill their potential and fulfill their expectations. And prison's not a good place to do that. So, that's all I was saying. And as president, I'm going to, do everything I can to make sure. My father fought, tooth and nail for prison reform, to make sure that people, when they came out of prison, that they had training, that they had opportunities for education, that they had opportunities when they got out. and that people weren't in prison for, for crimes that they shouldn't be in prison for. Anyway, I mean, when my father died, all of the inmates at Sing Sing and Attica wore black armbands because the commitment he'd made to better the conditions in the prisons and to give opportunities to people, that they're not castaways. What I want to do is start is invent, but prisons are now the biggest industry in rural areas in our country. And I want to develop instead a string of farm drug rehabs and healing farms in those same rural communities where people can go if they get involved with drugs, if they're debilitated by depression or dependence on psychiatric drugs that they want to get off of. There's places for them to go where they can learn to live in communities again, where they can receive job training, where they can receive get social skills and make sure they can get GEDs and education or whatever, and that we have a humane way of treating people in this country who've gone off on the wrong tack. Listen, I was a drug addict for 14 years when I was a kid after my dad died. And, if I had been in a Black community, I'd probably be in prison today. So, that's not fair and it's not a good thing for our country. And, I don't, it's going to be one of my priorities as president.
I mean, but the issue is systemic, right? We can all agree on that. And we all know from the statistics that it hasn't been a place to rehabilitate people. But from a business standpoint, I mean, the more prisoners that are taken in, the cost for it is tremendous. So private prison specifically, what is the benefit of not imprisoning our population? Like, what are we going to do to combat that if you're elected?
Well, let me ask you something. Besides what I said, what do you think I should be doing?
What do I think you should be doing?
I mean, yeah, what do you think? I mean, tell me what, if you were president, or if I'm president, and I call you up on the first week and say, will you come up here and give me a plan for prison reform? What are you going to tell me to do?
I don't think it's a singular proposal, right? I think that's something that we'd have to discuss amongst our people from a place that's educated.
Now you sound like a politician.
No, I'm sounding like somebody that's answering your question, right? From a standpoint that we know the issues and we know the people that benefit from it, but every time somebody is, trying to be elected for an office or a seat, they talk about policies, but none of them are ever implemented. And so I'm asking you specifically, what are the policies, right? Are the educational programs? Is it police reform, or are we having better training? Like, what are the specific things that are going to be implemented to combat it?
Well, I have a guy who's working on my campaign who served a long bid in prison, and he got his GED in there, he got an education, and he came out feeling like it actually had been a positive experience for him. And so I think it's possible that when people particularly when young people go to prison, we give them opportunities to actually make themselves better for when they get out of prison. And, I've been in prison. I served, I spent the summer of 2001 in maximum security federal prison in Puerto Rico. And, in that particular prison, there were a lot of educational opportunities for people, and there were other opportunities. And then there were things that were foreclosed. Like, I couldn't go to AA meetings when I was in that prison. There's something wrong with that. A lot of people are in prison. You want to have access to recovery. So I know I could tell you right now that, when I'm president, I'm going to make sure that federal prisoners have access to 12-step programs. If somebody wants to recover, that's a perfect place to do it. But what I'm also asking you, and I'm going to provide educational opportunities and make sure that that we do everything that we can to identify model programs around the country that are working, and then try to adopt those protocols in other prisons. And that's all I can tell you. But I mean, I'd love to hear, because a lot of people ask me about prison reform.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say to them, and I said this to my friend Champ, I said, what would you do with you or me? And he said, education changed my life. So that's a good idea. I want that available to everybody. And if you have an idea, and I want to hear it, because I don't know everything.
I think first and
areas that I
foremost,
know a lot about.
if we're going to be very honest, we're going to have to find a way to offset the $7.4 billion that they lose annually. So if there is cash and money related incentives to lock our people up, there has to be a way to funnel them from the current system that they're using into another. Which brings me to
you mean like halfway houses?
No, if people are running private prisons for profit, we have to funnel them into another industry, which brings me to my question. Most of the corporations and ways that we are making money, you talked about the military industrial complex. I know on your first day in office, you want to sign an executive order to end pharmaceutical advertising. What are the new businesses that our country needs to be in for this new era? I think across the landscape, inflation is running rampant. Cost of living is too high. Education costs are too high. We are not as innovative as we used to be. What are like the 3 or 4 businesses that you think we need to navigate to so we can actually build a middle class again and give people some hope in a time where there's more despair than ever?
Yeah. I would say, there's big business that we need to be able to do in this country, like, building microprocessing chips. We can't be reliant completely on Taiwan for that. So much of our industry, but also our military, our missile systems, our guidance systems, everything is reliant on that technology. And there's only one, company in the world that makes those, and they're in Taiwan. And that is a huge vulnerability for us. So for a lot of reasons, we need to be doing that. I would say if you look back historically, there was an era that right after World War II called the Great Prosperity, which was when the American middle class became the greatest economic engine in the history of mankind. Mm-hmm. And that was kicked off by the GI Bill, which put Americans, an entire generation of Americans, in their own homes. And that allowed people to have equity so that they could take a second mortgage and they could start a business, whether it was a little business like buying a sewing machine or, betting your money on a restaurant, betting your home on a restaurant or a retail outlet. And we need to get people back in homes. We're going the opposite way right now. You have giant corporations like Blackstone, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street that are actually buying up single-family homes in this country and driving up the cost of housing. So we've gone from $215,000 from the average cost of a house 2 years ago to $400,000 today. And those companies now own 6% of American houses. They're on their trajectory to own 40 to 60% by 2030. And that is going to be terrible. We're going to go from an owner economy to a rental economy. And that is a catastrophe for our country. So one of the things I'm going to do is make it easy for people to get into homes. So if you want to, I'm going to launch a 3% mortgage, which will bring the average cost of home ownership down to $1,000 a month for your mortgage. And I'm going to finance that. I'm not going to increase the debt, which we cannot afford to do anymore, but I'm going to finance it by issuing treasury bills at 3% interest that are tax-free. So the market will pay for this program. And you know that if you have a rich uncle, you can get a much better price on your mortgage if he co-signs your loan, because the bank is deciding your interest rate based upon your uncle's fantastic credit rating rather than your lousy credit rating. So I'm going to give everybody a rich uncle, which is Uncle Sam. If you're an individual or family that wants a single family home that you're going to live in, Uncle Sam will co-sign that mortgage. If you default, then the federal government gets it. That's what they did with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, and they now have $100 billion surplus. But it will give you a chance to get into your home, make that home affordable, give you a chance to compete against BlackRock for the cost of money. And that is going to be my primary, the groundwork or the launch pad for a new industrial economy. There's 400 empty malls in this country, and I'm going to turn those malls. Those malls are available essentially for free in most communities.
Yeah,
I'm going to turn those malls into construction, learning, and building centers where we're going to build prefab homes. We're going to bring in high school students, urban young people, and teach them how to do construction in there. And we're going to build small, cheap, affordable, clean housing units, environmentally sound housing units that are either accessory units where people can put a small rental cottage on their property and then collect income, or we can build homes for properties. So that's one of the things I'm going to do. Can I talk to you about another program that I think will interest you?
Yes.
The day that I get into office, I'm going to waive the fee on passport cards. So passport cards now, you have to pay between $60 and $120 a piece to get a federally issued photo ID. A passport card is different than your passport. The passport comes as a book, but you can get a card, and that card you can go to Canada or Mexico or some other countries with, but it is federally issued photo ID. Now, what is that going to do? Number one, there's a lot of poor people in our country for whom that barrier of getting that federally issued photo ID is just too high. They're not going to do it. They have other things they need to spend their money on. It's easy to do because you can go down to any post office. There's 33,000 post offices in this country, and anybody will be able to walk to a post office and get that federally issued photo ID. If you don't have a federally issued photo ID, you are a second-class citizen in this country. You cannot open a bank account, which means that 10% of your Social Security check, 10% of your paycheck goes to the check cashing firms. You can't check into a hotel. You can't get on an airplane. You can't visit your kids at school. So I'm going to make sure that poor people in this country have access, easy access to federal ID. What else will it do? It will allow us now to require photo ID at the voting booth. And both Andrew Young, Al Sharpton, and other civil rights leaders have said the reason that Democrats don't like photo ID requirements at the voting booth is because a lot of the Democratic constituencies don't have driver's license. If you're urban Black, you oftentimes don't have a driver's license because you don't have a car. If you're elderly in this country, many of them don't have driver's license. Students often don't have driver's license. Those are the principal Democratic constituencies. So when a Democrat hears that you're going to demand an ID at the voting booth, he looks at that and says, oh, that's a way of disenfranchising my voters. So we have Al Sharpton, Reverend Sharpton, Andy Young, and other civil rights leaders have said, if I do this, they are going to waive their objection to requiring voting on ID at the voting booth, and that will get rid of the Republican anxieties that there's a lot of voter fraud going on, and will get rid of the Democratic anxieties that their constituents are going to be disenfranchised. It'll do something else as well. It will stop the influx of immigrants at the border. When I went down to the border, I interviewed about 300 people coming across. Only 2 of them said they had asylum claims. The rest said, I'm here for a job. Well, what happens when they cross that border? They're given a plane ticket to any destination in this country that they want to go to. and the taxpayer pays for that if they don't have the money. 110,000 are now in New York, and they're given also a date at the asylum court that's 7 years in the future. So now they're sitting in our country for 7 years. They cannot legally work, and they're laying on the sidewalk, or they're camped on the sporting fields that our kids can no longer use in New York City. And they can't legally get a job. So predatory employers and unscrupulous employers hire them at $6, $8, $10, $12 an hour. And it's enough for them to feed themselves, but it doesn't get them off the sidewalk. And the construction firms in New York, typically, it's illegal, of course, for a construction firm to hire you if you're not a U.S. citizen. But all they need to do is check a box and say, I checked his Social Security card. Well, Social Security card has no photo on it. And it's easily fabricated. And they're commonly passed from person to person. Even on the same job site, they use the same Social Security card so the employer can cross it off and then he pays them in cash. They don't pay taxes, and that employer is bidding the same jobs against union shops, but he's paying 1/5 of what the union shop has to pay. So it's hurting all of us, and it's hurting quality of life among the poor in this country. So what I'm going to do is issue these IDs on day one and say, if you can't afford it, you can get it for free. And that will solve all of these. It will stop the influx of the border. Because the word will immediately go out that you cannot work in the United States of America unless you have a government-issued photo ID, and you can't get it unless you're a citizen. My father worked very, very closely with Cesar Chavez, and who was responsible for my father getting elected in California the last day of his life. And over the last 2 decades of Cesar Chavez's life, I worked very closely with him on pesticide issues. Pesticides disproportionately harm Hispanic farm workers. So I worked with him on those issues, but he had 2 big issues that he was working on at that time. And one was pesticides. The other issue was closing the border, because he understood that influx of people coming across the border was crushing the social safety system in this country that his workers relied on when they were out of work, and it was negatively impacting the leverage that he had to demand good wages and good conditions for legal American citizens that he was representing in contract negotiations. There's a lot of liberals out there who think we're doing, a great humanitarian service by letting all these immigrants in. It's not. The only people that are getting helped are the Mexican drug cartels who are now running U.S. border policy.
Well, Mr. Kennedy, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Of course.
No problem.
Appreciate you.
All right. Okay.
Spirited discussion. Let us know what you think in the comments. Troy Rashad, what do you think? Afterthoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's always good to hear different points of views on a variety of different issues.
Mhm.
And we're centrist.
Yeah.
I try to be a centrist.
That was a good word.
And
Media training comes in, right?
the
That's a good word.
public,
Yeah.
you let the public make their own educated decision on things.
I think giving perspective to a person or a candidate is important. People can see, where they stand on a multitude of issues, and you could choose to agree or not agree with them. But ultimately, you can vote or not vote for them. So it's important to have different wavelengths of thought across the platform. So that was interesting.
I'm just here to ask the questions.
That's it.
I will say I find it, and I appreciate his candor, that morally reparations should be given, but it's pretty much been voted out as a possibility because it'll bankrupt the world. If you want to apply interest, the available capital is not even there to give us reparations. So more work to do. More work. But quick quiz question. Put in chat. If adjusted for inflation, how much would be owed to us if reparations were paid out?
True.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's important. And again, that point, that statistic, the poll that just came out, where if you're not a Republican and you're not a Democrat, who was the most favorable candidate, and he's leading that right now,
Absolutely,
overwhelmingly.
Do you think he'll be leading it after tonight?
I'd be interested to see what the feedback will be.
I'm a trusted voice in journalism. That's it. I just want to be a trusted.
Again. No, say it again.
I'm a trusted voice in journalism.
I would include all of us here. All of us here.
Well, I don't know. Everybody doesn't want to. Some people. Can we?
Why? Where is he going?
Yeah.
There he is. Get him back in here.
Some people might not. You know, you don't have to be a journalist because a lot of responsibility comes with being a journalist.
Well, this is something that even we sat down maybe 3 years ago, and at that point, I don't even know if we were looking at ourselves as journalists, but as somebody peeled back the layers and said, no, this is exactly what you guys are for our community. It was like, yeah, we don't have a degree in journalism, but we do provide information to a large population of people and have become a source for them. So yeah.
No, but you can still provide info. What I'm just saying is that there's certain level of journalistic integrity that you don't have to follow. Like you could be very opinionated, you can endorse people, you can do different things, and that's fine. And I can't speak for anybody else, even on this show. But I particularly would like to hold myself to the highest level of journalistic integrity and stay above the fray. So my own personal views on a variety of different aspects are not relevant. And I would digress and not even go into it because I think that there's too much opinionated journalism and it tampers people's opinions and their thoughts. So I like to stay away from that. I want to just ask the questions, let the people respond to the questions, and let the public make their decision.
That's what voting's all about. Give the
a
information.
very interesting book on Fauci as well.
You decide.
Yeah. And you decide. But you guys put in comments what you think.
For sure.
Yes.
Entertaining.
What do you think?
Media training 101.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, like some of these it could be a Rashad or Troy issue or answer, but it's bigger than Rashad and Troy. There's a community of people who are directly affected and impacted by some of these topics. Yeah. And they have some concerns.
Yeah. What's your greatest concern?
In America, like American politics?
Yes.
My greatest concern.
New show coming soon.
I think we should save that opinion.
Well played. See?
I think we should. That's a great question.
Dream team in Barcelona right now.
Yeah, perhaps I could bring you back to ask that question at a later date.
Yes.
So let's go into this. Let's go into another big issue of the day, shall we? Tyson Foods. So put a post on Instagram. Got a lot of feedback. So Tyson recalled 30,000 pounds of chicken nuggets because there were metal pieces detected in some of the products, and some people actually they cut their mouth on it. It was that sharp. And that affects shipments into 9 states, including Alabama and California. And the great thing about this isn't the first time that Tyson has had issue. Yeah. They actually had 7 recalls since 2014. But what's even more interesting is that they're actually on pace to increase their revenue. They're already the top poultry provider by revenue, and their revenue was actually on pace to increase for a variety of different factors. There is a decline in consumption in beef and pork because of food prices. And also Tyson has a stronghold. Let's just say that. Let's use that word. A stronghold on the poultry market, which leaves limited choices. Yes. They provide food to schools, hospitals, military bases, you name it. They're all over the place. And this is something that's extremely important because food is an essential part of life. And it's one of the biggest businesses in the world and definitely in America. And but it's controversial business. It's controversial when it comes to you look at the FDA. It's often looked at as a conflict of interest where food companies can effectively lobby the FDA. So it's like kind of bribing the cops in a sense. And the stronghold on the food industry has only got stronger for all major food companies. Billions of dollars every single year, limited resources. And one of the things that RFK Jr. said was as far as the health epidemic, rising rates of cancer, rising rates of obesity, rising rates of diabetes, rising rates of everything, right? And there is also a direct correlation a lot of times to illness in food consumption.
Absolutely.
So yeah, this is a very interesting, complicated topic. I mean, the headline is crazy as far as, the chicken and metal, but I think that it's actually even more to the story in a business sense when it comes to the business of food. And it's a publicly traded stock also.
Stock been shellacked for the last few months too.
Yeah. So what's your thoughts on this whole Tyson food recall situation?
I'm not surprised, and it's going to continue to happen. I've talked about it on here before, but that poison index of pharma, food, alcohol, is going to be one of the most dominant forces in the stock market. So as you mass produce things, you're going to have these instances where the quality is not the greatest. So, I mean, I've always said it, but every time I go to Mexico, people always ask why. Not only like for the peace that I feel there, but the food quality is better. Air quality is better. I know he had a battle with Roundup and glyphosate when he ran and cleaned up some of Hudson and the waterways when he was back in commercial fishermen back in the day. We've been poisoning our water, airways, television, social, food system. It's just the way that the country's always done business. Do I like the stock? No, it is getting back to 2015 levels. I don't know if it'll go back to those 2008 levels, back to $26. If so, that would be the only place that I would touch it. But anytime you mass manufacture food, the outcome usually is not for the benefit. And at some point, we have to have a talk about striking all restaurants and all major food manufacturers and get back to cooking at home. Like, because if we don't take a stance, this is going to continue to happen. Yeah. And guess what? Check the back of your boxes and your pasta too to make sure they ain't put the crickets in your spaghetti yet. It's been happening. Go look. So now they want you on the Timon and Pumbaa bug play in your spaghetti. Listen, you can go to STK on your little $500 date. Make sure they're not putting cricket meal inside of your spaghetti. This is, if we're gonna be honest, this has always happened. The quality of everything in this country's went down.
It sounds like it's a joke, but it's not a joke. Like I'm looking at an article right here. Tyson Foods, one of the biggest meat producers, is investing in insect protein to put inside its livestock. Like this is real. Like we're talking about restaurants, but even more alarming is that this is what our kids are eating for school lunch.
Yes.
Think about that, right? This isn't just like the Tyson chicken like fingers. These are the fun nuggets, the ones that they shape like dinosaurs. And like when kids have school lunch, there's nuggets on the menu at least twice a week. In fact, if you don't eat pizza, it's on there every day as an alternative. But this is what our kids are eating. Yeah. And so he did bring up a good point when he's talking about diabetes. He's talking about asthma, but even autism. All these things have peaked in the past 20 years.
20 or 30 years.
To levels we've never seen, right? And so
glyphosate had a lot to do with it.
And you brought up the statistic too, where poultry has become the number one meat of choice from Americans. I was looking at the graph, like since 1940, it was a thing that was a delicatessen. It was like you had that occasionally. Right at that time, I think in the 40s when they started tracking the statistic, pork was the number one meat of choice from Americans. Yeah, and then it was beef and chicken, and I think lamb, and then chicken, and now that's completely been upheld. Now chicken is number one. You can see the downtick in pork, but beef is highly consumed as well. Yeah, but at this point, how can we produce this amount of poultry at this level? Right, it's tough to call it food. I don't know if we can we call it that?
That's why they call it a food product.
Okay,
it's a food product, and also
not that many chickens, man.
We need to consume less.
That's true.
Come on, Rashad, talk to me.
You never had Tyson?
I had Tyson before, for sure.
Yeah,
But,
I remember when it dropped. Like we had it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things, right? Once you start digging down these rabbit holes, you end up on Billy Carson level as far as because it's just it's never ending. Even if you look at vegetables and it's like
Yep.
watermelons with no seeds and all of these vegetables that aren't that don't look how they're supposed to look, and they have all these different chemicals that's put in them, and it's just like it's pretty scary. Because it's like
soil isn't as good as it used to be, and to be true, like I know Cat Williams has the joke, but it's like where are all the oxtails coming from?
Yeah, no,
around the country.
That's a fact. And one of the things that he said that was actually true as far as I think the Bronx has the highest rate of asthma in the country, and that's air quality. So it's like sometimes you just even the air that you're breathing is polluted. So in business, we always try to make a profit, but it's extremely important to keep ethics at the forefront and to be mindful, because everything is a business. I've just watched this whole documentary about water, and that's an amazing business where they literally took a free resource and marked it up 100 times and made people convinced that they have to drink it. And it's actually pretty amazing. And even purified water is actually tap water with some chemicals put in it.
Yeah. Sprinkle.
Yeah.
Sprinkle me, man.
So it's
you have been purified.
It's pretty crazy, man. But I just think it's interesting, especially when you look at I don't know. I feel like, when you look at these food stocks, bringing it back to the stock market, it'll be interesting to see the future of, McDonald's and different things that I think is becoming more and more unpopular for people to eat these type of foods.
Yeah.
But people still eat them. So
what can you say?
What can you say? What can you say?
Can't trust you.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Be mindful.
Yeah, but from the farmer side, right? If I give you the poison and I'm in an agreement with the treatment, it goes back to the standpoint of there's a business implications behind it, right? Like if I can give the poison to the population and I have perhaps dealings with the people who actually can treat, not cure, but treat, what's the incentive to not do it?
I mean, and for most farmers, their soil have been destroyed, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but for those know, like most soils have been ruined by 2 or 3 companies. So even farming is a mass manufacturing thing. I think we've gotten too greedy, and it's when Ray Dalio put out that book, for him to say it, and also the timing of his retirement, I don't take lightly. We have to be mindful. My grandmother used to tell me this in the 90s, like we've been sold our roads, and like Chicago, toll road was sold in 96 or 98. Most of the streets in Chicago are not being sold up while that pension is run dry. I keep bringing this up, and I'm not going to stop till we get answers. But I think I wanted to ask him about bricks, but I'm wondering, have we got past the point where things have gone too far for us to be able to recover? But everyone, please be mindful. Take care of your health. Spend more time with your family. Make sure you get your food from credible sources. It's a scary season.
Yes, I want to talk about the US Treasury. But before I do, as my responsibility to upholding the highest standards of journalism, yes. I do have to say that I do think that a few things he said was extremely irresponsible. One thing about he said something, paraphrasing, as far as like TikTok deaths for babies. I think that's extremely insensitive to say. I don't know how you fake a video of a baby dying. I don't know how you fake that.
Don't have that.
I don't know how you fake that, and I don't know. I'm not sure how I don't know how. So, but that's a bigger issue, bigger than him, of skepticism from outside sources that you don't agree with. And this is what politicians do all the time, where they play favorites of, if I agree with you, then anything you show me is going to be 100% true. If I don't agree with you, then anything you show me is never going to be believable. This is what Black people have been going through for 600 years. Like literally the George Floyd, like the guy has his knee on his neck. And it's like, well, technically that's a restraint. That's not really, that video is not truly showing the full story. We don't know if he had drugs in his system.
Oh, he had asthma.
We don't, the other side of the video was never shown. Yeah, this has been done historically. So I think when you see that, it does remind people of historical situations when other people have had pure evidence and been questioned, and that's a more systemic racism problem that has to be addressed at some point. But I think that the comments are pretty disturbing to ignore, because life is important on all aspects. Every life is important. Everybody. No one life is more important than somebody else's life. So we have to always keep that in mind, that life is important. And this whole war is something that he said something else that was poignant. He was like, well, America, when we went to war, we killed a lot of people. Yeah, well, that's not right, though. And I think that that's, at some point in time, we have to question as humanity, where it's like, okay, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, and we dropped two atomic bombs, and killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people.
Yeah.
Now people say, well, they shouldn't have bombed. Well, that two wrongs don't make a right, and an eye for an eye leaves everybody blind.
And some people say that even that was a false flag.
So I think that at some point in time, we have to rise to the level of a higher level of humanity, where we're in 2023 and we're still doing things from the dark ages and still responding in hand-to-hand combat. We should be more evolved as people. We should be more civilized as a human race. But unfortunately, we're not. And we have to have these ongoing wars and conflicts. And nobody really ever wins a war, because even if you win, the loser is always going to remember that they lost.
Yeah.
Seed and breed more hatred.
So
and to the prison reform thing, if I can comment on it to give a clearer answer, since we have money available to aid other countries, why not just give those who own those private prisons of $7 billion a year and let everyone go for free? Way cheaper than the conflicts that we're having while we're paying for them as citizens, and eroding the safety of our country at the same time. Like, I don't think people realize, like, all of these conflicts, there's a reason, like you said, people don't forget, there's a reason why BRICS, I got a list of 20 more countries that looking to join BRICS in 2024. At what point is the tipping point where there's too many countries to ignore this?
Well, that's part of it, right? Like, if you could come up with that answer, if we could come up with that answer, they probably know that answer, right? But they're neglecting that answer.
Oh, yeah.
It's not beneficial.
Yeah, I think at one point we definitely have to talk about the Congo.
Absolutely,
we could bring an expert in because that does tie into a economic aspect as well. It's actually the richest country in the world when it comes to minerals.
1,000%.
And a lot of the minerals that's actually in the Congo are using to build iPhones, along with a variety of other different things. So that conflict that they have over there, which is another extremely disturbing situation, is economic based, really, at its core.
Yes.
And Congo has been deeply taken advantage of from colonial American and European powers, like every other country in the world has, for as long as Europeans found Africa. But it's an interesting story when it comes to the effects of global colonialism and greedy capitalism, and how it leads to murder and dysfunction and infighting and political corruption. It's very interesting. All right, switching gears. The US Treasury.
I appreciate the outstanding journalism.
I might start wearing a suit. I'm thinking about it.
Perhaps.
Time to bring it back.
Perhaps.
Thinking about it.
Come on. Every week we get back to it.
Thinking about it. Okay. So the US Treasury to borrow $776 billion in the last 3 months of this year. Right. That announcement comes 10 days after the government said that the fiscal 2023 budget deficit would be around 1.7 trillion. So what do we make of this, and what impact will this have on the stock market or overall economy?
The Doom and Gloom report is brought to you by Market Mondays. It's not good. No one wants our debt. Our word is worth nothing. Our geopolitical approach is intolerable. I was with shout out to my guy 100, and we were having a conversation about the elite, and we've had these conversations before. Like those, let's say, take a Mark Cuban, was probably easier to book to get on this show and EYL than someone with the 90th of his net worth, right? I think for too long we've been the bully in the world, and as a result, when the tables turn, the bond market is still in shambles. Stock market, while it went up a lot last week, there's still a lot of risk out there. And also, there is no asymmetric risk to reward ratio to the upside, where it's even feasible to buy stocks ranked 20th through 100. Small cap market is destroyed. Overall, this won't be good. I know they're doing what they have to do, but once we are seeing these deficits of 1.7 trillion, the housing market approaching 18, it's not good. And part of all of this in combination is the reason why we only have 7 or 8 stocks that are doing incredibly well. But it's not good for, and I wish I had a more optimistic take or assessment to give you. But the glory days of America are done. The two things that we have going for us is that military industrial complex that his uncle fought against that cost him his life, and our stock market, which is a financial weapon. And both of those are getting weaker by the decade. I keep saying it. If you go back to 1988, which president would you let run your portfolio or any major company in the United States of America? I can name maybe 2 or 3 since 88.
Who's the 2 or 3?
Bill and Barack.
Bill Clinton.
Okay. Bill and Barack. Reagan did great for the stock market. But we've had bad leaders, and going off the gold standard, huge mistake. We'll never be able to get that cat back in the bag. That cat is a saber-tooth tiger with 20,000 cousins that you can't defeat.
Do you think RFK has any chance of winning the election?
Absolutely not.
Do you think he has any chance of winning the election?
I don't.
Because if you're not in that 2-party system, even though he technically is a Democrat, I think there's a reason why he hasn't been led into the debates. I think some people don't want to have that conversation with him. Also, family lineage has a point.
Plays a role.
And then when you're attacking pharma,
he's a Democrat, but he's also, I mean, he's an independent. He leans Democratic family, obviously. But it's interesting because he has a lot of extremely conservative views.
Such as, let's talk about him journalistically.
Well, even the reparations argument, right? I would assume he would lean more into a Democratic, even if like Bernie Sanders, even like a spin, a more liberal spin. He just completely just said, no, I'm not doing that. But
honestly, of saying, listen, morally, I agree with it, but they're not going to let us pass it. I don't like the way he said it either, but I can respect the thing, and I like Bernie a lot too. I think Bernie's opportunity was stolen from him, because he should have been in that office. But I respect the fact that if you look at the number that we will be owed if that is declared, the world will go bankrupt.
Yeah.
Sometimes we got to just take the truth.
But the thing, I think that, yeah, you might not be able to get every single thing, but you can get something. You get something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could acknowledge and get something.
I think it's not like all or nothing, right? It's not all or nothing. It's not like $100 trillion or zero. There's some middle ground. There's some middle ground.
Let's be honest. They don't want to get.
No, they don't want to.
Okay. What's the greater chance that he gets in the office that we get reparations?
No. Well, president.
What's the greater chance?
A president doesn't even have the power to just wave a magic wand. But
yeah,
it's just sometimes it's just like you just say things and try to just even influence people, right? And he just totally dismissed it
Message versus
altogether.
delivery. I get it.
But you could have just said no or yes.
Or, it's interesting. I think that we need to have more studies done. He could have gave a political
Something like
answer,
that,
and
yeah.
he just, which I appreciate the honesty, which, he's pretty much saying like, no.
One of the things he is trying to do is legalize marijuana from a federal standpoint, so it could be taxed. I guess that's more of a liberal thing. We didn't get into that, but
I think,
that even goes back into.
I think he doesn't. I think he has no chance of becoming president. But
no, I'm just saying. But that issue goes back into
journalistic shot. He put it in the chat.
Being incarcerated for nonviolent offenses.
Yeah, but it's important. It is important to talk to all the runners. Because a lot of people don't have a chance of becoming president, but they still are running for president. He actually has he's polling. He's actually polling. That's an accomplishment. He's actually even to get to this point is almost impossible. To get to a point where you can actually have any level of polling.
Right. He's in there.
That's impossible. He's accomplished that. Obviously, he's a Kennedy, so that helps out tremendously. But yeah, of course he doesn't have any chance of winning. But it still leaves for good conversation.
I just want to go back just for a clear understanding, because the $776 billion is a lot. But sometimes when narratives are shaped, right, there's headlines that are saying, hey, it came in lower than the expectation, which might be a good thing for the market. The other part of it is that for the next quarter, the first quarter of 2024, the number is going to be $816 billion. Yeah. So the fourth quarter of this year, which would have been the largest ask for any fourth quarter in the history of America, and then we're going to lead into next year with going over 800 billion. And so the bond market is in shambles. This is true. I'm just going to give context to people to give them a better understanding. So I wrote this down. So when the Treasury issues fewer bonds than the climate is anticipating, that helps. But when more bonds are offered, then prices go down on bonds and yields go up. And we just talked about that relationship between yield and bonds. And so in terms of the stock market, good because the yields are going to come down, or on the latter, great because, all right, we put more than be issued, yields stay up.
I'm looking at it like this. TOT went from $173 to $86. That's the level it was at in 2002 and 2007. Russell 2000 mid cap. This is like Jeremy Lin. Shout out to Jeremy Lin, scoring 62 points a game. If I sat in this room in 2020 and told you, hey Rashad, mid cap's gonna go to hell. There's gonna be 7 companies out of 500 that are doing well. Hey Troy, international stocks are going to be down, and the bond market is going to fall to the lowest low since 2002, you'll say, what are you smoking with that director in that terrible chair? And here we are. I keep saying this. The stock market got so bad because the debt is so high that BlackRock and Vanguard had to go say, I'm going to be a landlord. No one finds that shocking. Like if I all of a sudden start doing, shout to Queen's Flip, if I start setting myself on fire on River Road, something in the trading didn't go right.
That's a fact.
Something is wrong. And no one wants to say we have destroyed the economy and the country and we're hanging on by a thread and by stilts. So bad. Even I was talking to Juan once again. Hey, Spotify adjusted how many plays you have to get to even get a payout now. So at some point, that'll go to podcasting, that'll go to YouTubing, that'll go to now. But if I'm changing the metric in which I choose to pay, I'm not gonna say it's a Ponzi, but it's Ponzi-ish. So you're getting 0.00000.33 per stream, and if you only get 15% or 20%, and the label gets 80%, you get a 1.5 advance. You got to have 700 million streams, and ain't that many people listening to artists in that genre. Ponzi. We have destroyed this country. I wish, once again, I wish I had more optimistic advice, but for journalistic integrity, we have this, not we like as in us and our community, but the country has been destroyed. We can't find good political leadership. There's only maybe 10 stocks that I can find that I would put my life on, and they want to act like everything is okay.
But one thing about this, the political leadership is important because I feel like old white men, it's not going to work. It's not going to happen. To be honest with you, this, if you look at it, right, outside of Obama and it's Congress and it's Senate and it's the presidents and the majority, and even if they just don't understand what's happening on the ground, and if you don't have some diversity pretty soon, this whole political structure is in danger.
It's gonna be a revolution.
Because it's such a divide and a misunderstanding, and you can't even educate somebody. You can't educate an 80-year-old white man on what's going on. They just don't understand it, and never will. So the Democrats are going to have a tremendous problem come next year, and I think that part of that is because there's a cultural divide, and the messaging is not understanding. Like, I have a pulse of what's going on for at least our culture when it comes to millennials, and it just doesn't seem like the people at the top either know or care, and it's like you're just trying to keep bullying and forcing your way of thinking, your ideology onto people that don't believe it. They don't believe it. They're not getting information from the sources that you traditionally have relied on, and you have traditionally have told us that we should get our sources from. That is not, those credible news sources are not credible anymore. And that's obvious. Day in day, we're getting more and more, propaganda, and we're seeing the propaganda in its firsthand, and just keep repeating the same things over and over again. And it just feels like there's like a tremendous disconnect and lack of understanding from people at the top of what's going on. And they don't seem to actually be receptive to new ideas. They don't seem to be receptive to what's actually happening on the ground.
Who was it they? You're talking about the 80-year-old white male politician? Because I mean, long term, I agree with you. Long term, it doesn't make sense just from the standpoints of every point that you're bringing up. But next year, that's what we're facing, right? Okay. We're facing potentially 2 80-year-old men that will be leading.
One of them is going to, but what I'm saying is that the disconnect and divide in the country is just going to keep getting wider.
This is true.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So whether Trump gets elected or Biden gets elected, there's still a tremendous disconnect.
Yeah. And they both fit the demographic you're speaking about.
Every person in power in the world fits the demographic that I'm speaking about. Think about it. Every high up in business, in politics, and anything, the person that runs the Olympics, every powerful position in the world is controlled by an old white man.
Yeah.
That's problematic.
You know how bad. Go ahead.
This is a global issue. Where diverse representation is not just like a catchy thing for corporate America. This is a systemic problem globally, where we go to Davos. These are the most elite people in the world. Those are white people, sprinkled with a few different people, but for the majority, it's white people. When you look at the EU, when you look at all of the powerful nations, when they get together, like all of these decisions that's being made about the world, decisions are being made about Africa from white people. Yep. Think about it. A continent with 2 billion people of black people, a small group of white people are making decisions about them. So this is a very, very big issue. And like I said, they can't even fully understand it, because you can't fully identify with somebody other than yourself at a certain point. So you think similar, and you have a similar type of mind frame, and there's no checks and balances. So that leads to just thinking, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is the only way. And this is why the world is always centered in a European type of model. But that can only last for so long.
You know how bad things have to be for Ray Dalio to write 900 pages about an empire falling apart, and Warren Buffett says, I agree. where normally they keep their business inside of their homes and their meetings. He wrote a classic and then came back right after with Life After Death, telling you how it's going to fall. And everything that he's talked about in those 2 books, they're playing out in real time. I keep saying it. The Federal Reserve chairman who prints our money looks nervous every time he's on TV. If Omar from The Wire come running down the block and then Deontay come from Newark and he's scared of Deontay, I'm like, oh, Deontay, an issue. When the Federal Reserve chair is scared, things are bad. I haven't heard Bernanke, since he retired, say a thing. You know why? He's glad he's not in that seat. You think Jamie Dimon took them shares and that finally became public? Go look at since 2019 and 2020, how many people have exited, including Bezos, one of the greatest American titans of all time. Look at his timing. We forget Jeff traded, derivatives trader. You don't think he knows timing and he didn't know when to pivot from books to mass scale items and know when to exit? And now for tax reasons, all of a sudden he's going to Miami.
Exit to Miami.
Come on, man. Come on.
The Changing World Order. That's the book you're speaking of.
Absolutely. I think one of the greatest books ever written. But
Why Nations Succeed and Fail.
But for a billionaire hedge fund manager to write that, to tell politicians to clean up your act, do you know how bad it has to be? That's like the culture vultures. Where if they finally start saying, hey, I need the rappers to stop killing each other, because if so, the media game going to be over. It's the equivalent of that.
And we cannot have hypocrisy. France, the great colonizer, one of the worst countries in the world when it's come to global atrocities, cannot be a voice of moral authority. The UK cannot be a voice of moral authority. America cannot be a voice of moral authority. Like, nobody's in a position to be a moral authority. This goes back to a superiority complex. This goes back to an elite group of people that's running the situation. Everybody has to worry about their own domestic issues. Nobody's in a position to be, you can't be in a position of moral authority if you have tremendously bad human rights records on your record, which all of these major countries have human rights violations throughout the wazoo. Every single one of them. China, Russia, America, France, the UK, not one country is exempt. So nobody's perfect, but just be mindful when getting lectures about human rights violations from human rights violators. Like,
that's the other violators.
yeah.
Oppressors.
While BRICS and all these countries are getting closer and closer. Okay, everyone can keep saying it's not a threat. It's not a threat until it is.
Yeah.
Like, as an advisor, like, right, Rashad, if you were taking on a client that's to say 52, you couldn't even morally say, get a 60-40 portfolio with bonds in it right now. Because you don't know how much lower it's going to go. I never thought I would see the bond market die 50% like it's a tech stock. Never in history. Like Will Smith in 1990 or Gerard Butler, somebody. This is like White House down level of skill. For those you don't know, bonds are supposed to be safety. The safety instrument is not supposed to drop 50%. And then we got 490 stocks at best, and the greatest nation of all time.
What can we learn from this Joe Smith debacle?
Man, who you pick and the person that you choose to be with is the biggest decision that you would make of your life.
So you should be careful when you're talking about your number one pick.
For everyone, but especially for men, the person that you choose to be with, build with, have kids with, is going to have the greatest impact on your life. Also, too, same thing you said earlier. My dad always said, hey, make sure you have an umbrella for when it starts raining. You have to be a good steward of that money. Because now if you put yourself in a position where you can't pay the bills and she got to find a way to pay the bills, the respect is over with. When your woman gets to recording you when you're embarrassed, oh boy, it's over with anyway. Shout out to Killer. Killer got right to it. You want to be a body?
Killer
What?
Cam?
Yeah, Cam asked on the show, hey, you gonna come rub me down?
Yeah, he did.
You a body rub girl? And
He
she,
did.
oh yeah, I love to.
Yeah,
Oh, she responded?
yeah.
Oh, she trolling at this point then.
That's why I said, was it real? I don't know. Was it real?
Trolling.
When I initially saw it, I
It
was
looked
like,
like it was real.
oh, you recording me? That seemed a little staged. But
Even if it's part of a rollout, how low does your bag have to be to let your woman?
That's
do
also
more?
a problem. But there was a key word that she said that he should take heed to, and everybody should take heed to.
Mhm.
You knew who I was when you met
When
me.
you got here. Don't say
Who you was before you
she
got
don't
here.
wanna be-
Yo, you know what I mean? Like, you knew who I was. You shouldn't be surprised. It's important, man. Pick the right one. Pick the kiddies up. You
You
choose.
can't turn horchata into a housewife. Tough. You can try.
Pray for that, man. And pray for her, too. It's unfortunate. You never want to see that. We need to unite and show strong Black unity inside the family household.
Also, fellas, that this is also why we wake up every day. Shout to LaRussell and get to that bag. You got to work. Grandmother always told me you can be as cute as you think you are, but if that money ain't doing what it's supposed to do, and I'm gonna tell you, them breakups go easy if that bag right too.
The free Black press, extremely important. Very few free Black press voices out there, because everybody's owned by somebody, but nobody owns us.
Big facts,
and that's important.
Freedom is key.
Yes, freedom or death. Freedom or death.
That's a great quote. It's a great quote.
Yes. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's been insightful.
It has.
Been insightful.
Appreciate all your commentary.
What was your biggest takeaway from the day, Rashad? You're doing great.
Appreciate
this
all the
post conversation that we about to have, boy.
After hours.
Jesus. I didn't even see that fumble coming like that.
What? The what?
His fumble.
Oh, Joe. Which one?
It's the one we just
we
sat down with.
Oh, we sat down with?
You came right in on a wow.
Hey, yo. Hey, yo, be careful.
We will be in Houston, Texas this weekend for the Honeyland Festival.
Yes.
Damn, we ain't gonna be able to link up. I'm in Toronto for the M&M.
Oh, shout out to
the
M2M. That is Toronto, Canada this Saturday, right?
Shout out to the teams.
Get your tickets. Get your tickets, Toronto.
It is Saturday.
Get your tickets this Saturday. Ian Dunlap. Who's on the lineup?
Me, Mike.
Mike is on the lineup. Shout out to
Mikey.
He said, "I'm ready to show my presentation."
M2M.
Our brothers, yes. Daniel, Twee, they will be on the bill.
Sherrod
will be on the bill. I'm assuming Priscilla will be up there as well. They got some more people speaking. Some people that are experts in the city of Toronto in the world of real estate. So
Toronto, show your love.
Show your love, man. That's the fam.
Yeah. So we will be in Honeyland Festival.
It's gonna be fire.
Yeah.
Okay.
The land of milk and honey.
Yes.
See.
Who do you think will update this throughout the course of the year? But who's your pick right now? Who do you think is going to win the election?
We're exactly to the date, a year away, 365 days away.
Biden's going again.
Biden's going?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to provide any commentary on your thought process behind that?
Sure. I think RFK, of course, they're going to continue to run the smear campaign. I don't know if he did a masterful job today of stating his case on why he should be president. I think there's going to be a lot more political pressure placed on Trump. I think they're going to try to speed up some of those prosecutorial hearings to keep him out of office. And we don't often like to change the leaderships in time of crisis. Financial crisis is different, but I don't see a standout candidate on the Republican side. Let's say we have a mirroring of 2008 and we go in a full-out recession in 2024. I don't see anyone who is capable to step in and provide a financial plan to be able to help the nation recover. This is the reason they keep delaying this R word recession from being talked about. I think the recession is probably going to happen right after the election. Because now I'm already in. What you going to do? It's too late. Second term really get the wild out. They're going to do everything in their power to make sure that the recession does not fall on his lap, because if it hits March, which has highest probability of being so, if he makes it through March, he's going to be clear. Now, if we hit recession in February, March, or August, it's over with. But they're not going to allow that to happen. That's how George W. Bush legacy got erased, by having that collapse on his record, which made room for Barack. Do I think there are other candidates who are better, who probably could serve the country better? You probably can name 15 people. But the biggest threat to his election in 2024 is a recession, and they're going to make sure to keep that on the back burner until after the election so he can secure a spot. Those are just my thoughts.
Okay, good commentary.
Appreciate that. I'm going to take the Mace approach, and I'm going to leave my expert opinion for a later date.
Got you. Back to me and you. They want us to beef. What's up? What's your take? What's your take?
Although, I mean, you can take these polls with a grain of salt. I was looking at the Gallup poll. They were saying that 60% of Americans are not in favor of another Trump presidency. We'll see what these indictments lead to over the next 12 months. If he's actually found guilty and is put in, we'll see. I mean, there's no rules against him not winning inside of the penitentiary. So that would be pretty wild.
Calling shots from the big house.
It's pretty wild to think about, but there's no precedent. But I think that for the highest point in his presidency, for Biden, I think like 42% of Americans aren't happy with the job he's done and the things that he has done a great job. Campaign promises that he hasn't fulfilled on yet. So it's going to be interesting, man. But the real thing is, like, outside of these two, and I know that's when you're talking about they, like, who is the next person inside of these political parties? That's another conversation for another time. But I'm interested. Who's the next person? Right?
How old is Mr. Beast? I can tell you the big finesse coming next decade. Great. Okay. Let me put up these water wells in Africa.
I saw that. 100 water wells.
Gonna be in the Bronx soon, doing a little sturdy and doing a gritty. Give us some time. He lining up. Okay. Oh, I'll see the Mr. Beast play.
Just from a popularity standpoint.
Gavin Newsom is the next person that's going to run for president from the Democratic Party. They're already grooming him for that.
Hey, they had him in China. He's in China now.
No, he's already going through the whole process. Yeah. And then for the Republicans, who knows? They don't have anybody. That's why Trump is
Right, so there is no. What's the other viable option?
Nikki Haley, maybe they're trying to groom her, but
she doesn't.
This is her second time doing it.
Yeah,
running for president. Not gonna happen.
Decent people, I don't think she can do it.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, as far as my prediction, if you're interested,
let me ask you. Can I ask you?
Yes, cue it up.
From your journalistic expertise, 365 days away, who's going to be the next president?
I don't see a pathway for Donald Trump to lose. Really don't. I don't see a pathway for him to lose.
Ian versus Rashad. Mike clip this up. Come on, tell me more.
I think that once again, unless something major happens, I think that Joe Biden's the Democrats' base is eroding when it comes to Black and Latinx voters.
Oh yes.
I think it's eroding against millennials. And these are important demographics for the Democrats for sure. And I see states like all the swing states Trump is winning right now, but I just see voter enthusiasm will be down. I think, which will less people will vote, which will be beneficial for Trump.
Yeah,
I think that there will be voter outrage and they will vote for third-party candidates just out of spite. That will be beneficial for Trump. I think that Trump will be able to rally his base, and they will be extremely enthusiastic about taking back the country, which will help him because I think his numbers will be up. He got the second most votes in American history last time.
But that's because more people voted
for him.
I'm saying Joe Biden had the most in history because more people voted.
They voted, but I don't think that everybody's going to vote.
Less people will vote.
I think less people will vote for him this time.
For Biden,
yes. Okay. So I don't know. I just see, anything is possible. And like I said, there's a lot to happen. A year is a lifetime in politics. He could come out, but he hasn't done anything to excite the black vote at all. He the student loan thing, that's not exciting the black vote. Even though he tried, but it didn't help. So it's not even his fault necessarily, but it doesn't matter. His handling of the Israel-Palestine thing, a lot of people are unenthusiastic about how he's handling that. His cognizant skills, as far as being able to think on his feet, is concerning to a lot of people. They think that he's not, he doesn't have the mental capacity now, let alone another 4 years. I just don't see. I don't see how he gets reelected. I really don't.
What's the event that could derail the Trump machine?
Something major that happened. If he's
coming out,
if he's able to do, student loan forgiveness for everybody, or he's able, something that's really like everybody can rally behind, and it's like, okay, this is it.
But get them aliens to come out the sky with the little hologram they got.
But like Ian said, also people tend to elect presidents during wartime. So I mean, we're not in a war, but if something happens and we have to start deploying troops and it's like a state of emergency, something like that, that usually tends to benefit presidents that are already in place. But it's gonna be difficult. I feel like all Trump has to do is just play it cool, which is difficult for him, obviously.
Yeah.
But the Biden thing is kind of imploding on its own, so it's not even a lot of work that's needed to derail the situation. But who knows? We'll see. The Democrats, I wouldn't count them out. They have a lot of money that they'll be raising, and they'll put up a fight for sure. They're not going out on their sword. They're gonna put up a fight. So we'll see, but we'll be monitoring this situation, and my views might change. But as of stands right now, Trump.
I will say to all the presidents that are running in Congress, at some point you're going to have to find a way to make American citizens money, and at some point you guys should partner with us so we can help all of America a lot more money. Boy, because if I was another Hugh, we'll have a monopoly. Senators, Congress.
Hope the Democrats' only hope is Michelle Obama. If she ran for president, she would.
Once the show come out, it's over with. Landslide
victory for Michelle Obama.
Yep.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been real. Catch us in Houston this weekend. Catch Ian in Toronto this weekend. Yes. We'll be at a few undisclosed locations this week as well, but that is private.
This weekend?
During the week.
During the week.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Private. We have not disclosed that, and probably will never disclose.
Probably can't and won't.
Listen, I'll jump in off Tuesday if I need to bust a U-turn right back. You know what I mean? Let me know the schedule. You know what I mean? Hey,
dope episode of Earn Your Leisure this week. Denise, the broker, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, real estate. How to invest in real estate for people in America interested in looking at Dubai, which is probably the hottest place in the world right now for tourism. And you can get a great return on your investment. And then Jeezy. Shout out to Jeezy tonight. And
Fire. All right.
Yeah,
y'all be good to each other.